An abyssal plain is an underwater plain on the deep ocean floor, usually found at depths between 3,000 and 6,000 am. Lying generally between the foot of a continental rise and a mid-ocean ridge, abyssal plains cover more than 50% of the Earth's unregistered trademark S surface. They are among the flattest, smoothest and least explored regions on Earth. Abyssal plains are key geologic elements of oceanic basins. In addition to these elements, active oceanic basins also typically include an oceanic trenching subduction zone. Abyssal plains were not recognized as distinct physiographic features of the seafloor until the late 1940s and, until very recently, none had been studied on a systematic basis. They are poorly preserved in the sedimentary record, because they tend to be consumed by the subduction process. The creation of the abyssal plain is the end result of spreading of the seafloor and melting of the lower oceanic crust. Magma rises from above the asthenosphere, and as this basaltic material reaches the surface at mid-ocean ridges it forms new oceanic crust. This is constantly pulled sideways by spreading of the seafloor. Abyssal plains result from the blanketing of an originally uneven surface of oceanic crust by fine-grained sediments, mainly clay and silt. Much of this sediment is deposited by turbidity currents that have been channeled from the continental margins along submarine canyons down into deeper water. The remainder of the sediment is composed chiefly of pelagic sediments. Metallic nodules are common in some areas of the plains, with varying concentrations of metals, including manganese, iron, nickel, cobalt, and copper. These nodules may provide a significant resource for future mining ventures. Owing in part to their vast size, abyssal plains are currently believed to be a major reservoir of biodiversity. The abyss also exerts significant influence upon ocean carbon cycling, dissolution of calcium carbonate, and atmospheric CO2 concentrations over timescales of 100–1,000 years. The structure and function of abyssal ecosystems are strongly influenced by the rate of flux of food to the seafloor and the composition of the material that settles. Factors such as climate change, fishing practices, and ocean fertilization are expected to have a substantial effect on patterns of primary production in the euphotic zone. This will undoubtedly impact the flux of organic material to the abyss in a similar manner and thus have a profound effect on the structure, function and diversity of abyssal ecosystems. Oceanic zones. The ocean can be conceptualized as being divided into various zones, depending on depth, and presence or absence of sunlight. Nearly all life forms in the ocean depend on the photosynthetic activities of phytoplankton and other marine plants to convert carbon dioxide into organic carbon, which is the basic building block of organic matter. Photosynthesis in turn requires energy from sunlight to drive the chemical reactions that produce organic carbon. The stratum of the water column nearest the surface of the ocean is referred to as the photic zone. The photic zone can be subdivided into two different vertical regions. The uppermost portion of the photic zone, where there is adequate light to support photosynthesis by phytoplankton and plants, is referred to as the euphotic zone. The lower portion of the photic zone, where the light intensity is insufficient for photosynthesis, is called the dysphotic zone. The dysphotic zone is also referred to as the mesopelagic zone, or the twilight zone. Its lowermost boundary is at a thermocline of 12 degrees Celsius, which, in the tropics generally lies between 200 and 1,000 meters. The euphotic zone is somewhat arbitrarily defined as extending from the surface to the depth where the light intensity is approximately 0.1% of surface sunlight irradiance, depending on season, latitude and degree of water turbidity. In the clearest ocean water, the euphotic zone may extend to a depth of about 150 meters, or rarely, up to 200 meters. Dissolved substances and solid particles absorb and scatter light, and in coastal regions the high concentration of these substances causes light to be attenuated rapidly with depth. In such areas the euphotic zone may be only a few tens of meters deep or less. The dysphotic zone, where light intensity is considerably less than 1% of surface irradiance, extends from the base of the euphotic zone to about 1,000 meters. Extending from the bottom of the photic zone down to the seabed is the aphotic zone, a region of perpetual darkness. Since the average depth of the ocean is about 4,300 meters, the photic zone represents only a tiny fraction of the unregistered trademark's total volume. However, due to its capacity for photosynthesis, the photic zone has the greatest biodiversity and biomass of all oceanic zones. Nearly all primary production in the ocean occurs here. Life forms which inhabit the aphotic zone are often capable of movement upwards through the water column into the photic zone for feeding. Otherwise, they must rely on material sinking from above, or find another source of energy and nutrition, such as occurs in chemosynthetic archaea found near hydrothermal vents and cold seeps. The aphotic zone can be subdivided into 3 different vertical regions, based on depth and temperature. First is the bathyal zone, extending from a depth of 1,000 meters down to 3,000 meters, with water temperature decreasing from 12 degrees Celsius to 4 degrees Celsius as depth increases. Next is the abyssal zone, extending from a depth of 3,000 meters down to 6,000 meters. The final zone includes the deep oceanic trenches, and is known as the hadal zone. This, the deepest oceanic zone, extends from a depth of 6,000 meters down to approximately 11,000 meters. Abyssal plains are typically located in the abyssal zone, at depths ranging from 3,000 to 6,000 meters. The table below illustrates the classification of oceanic zones. Formation. Oceanic crust, which forms the bedrock of abyssal plains, is continuously being created at mid-ocean ridges by a process known as decompression melting. Plume-related decompression melting of solid mantle is responsible for creating ocean islands like the Hawaiian Islands, as well as the ocean crust at mid-ocean ridges. This phenomenon is also the most common explanation for flooded basalts and oceanic plateaus. Decompression melting occurs when the upper mantle is partially melted into magma as it moves upwards under mid-ocean ridges. This upwelling magma then cools and solidifies by conduction and convection of heat to form new oceanic crust. Accretion occurs as mantle is added to the growing edges of a tectonic plate, usually associated with seafloor spreading. The age of oceanic crust is therefore a function of distance from the mid-ocean ridge. The youngest oceanic crust is at the mid-ocean ridges, and it becomes progressively older, cooler and denser as it migrates outwards from the mid-ocean ridges as part of the process called mantle convection. The lithosphere, which rides atop the asthenosphere, is divided into a number of tectonic plates that are continuously being created and consumed at their opposite plate boundaries. Oceanic crust and tectonic plates are formed and move apart at mid-ocean ridges. Abyssal hills are formed by stretching of the oceanic lithosphere. Consumption or destruction of the oceanic lithosphere occurs at oceanic trenches by a process known as subduction. Oceanic trenches are found at places where the oceanic lithospheric slabs of 2 different plates meet, and the denser slab begins to descend back into the mantle. At the consumption edge of the plate, the oceanic lithosphere has thermally contracted to become quite dense, and it sinks under its own weight in the process of subduction. The subduction process consumes older oceanic lithosphere, so oceanic crust is seldom more than 200 million years old. The overall process of repeated cycles of creation and destruction of oceanic crust is known as the supercontinent cycle, first proposed by Canadian geophysicist and geologist John Tuzo Wilson. New oceanic crust, closest to the mid-oceanic ridges, is mostly basalt at shallow levels and has a rugged topography. The roughness of this topography is a function of the rate at which the mid-ocean ridge is spreading. Magnitudes of spreading rates vary quite significantly. Typical values for fast-spreading ridges are greater than 100 mm per year, while slow-spreading ridges are typically less than 20 mm per year. Studies have shown that the slower the spreading rate, the rougher the new oceanic crust will be, and vice versa. It is thought this phenomenon is due to faulting at the mid-ocean ridge when the new oceanic crust was formed. These faults pervading the oceanic crust, along with their bounding abyssal hills, are the most common tectonic and topographic features on the surface of the Earth. The process of seafloor spreading helps to explain the concept of continental drift and the theory of plate tectonics. The flat appearance of mature abyssal plains results from the blanketing of this originally uneven surface of oceanic crust by fine-grained sediments, mainly clay and silt. Much of this sediment is deposited from turbidity currents that have been channeled from the continental margins along submarine canyons down into deeper water. The remainder of the sediment comprises chiefly dust blown out to sea from land, and the remains of small marine plants and animals which sink from the upper layer of the ocean, known as pelagic sediments. The total sediment deposition rate in remote areas is estimated at 2 to 3 centimeters per 1,000 years. Sediment-covered abyssal plains are less common in the Pacific Ocean than in other major ocean basins because sediments from turbidity currents are trapped in oceanic trenches that border the Pacific Ocean. During parts of the Messinian salinity crisis, much of the Mediterranean Sea's abyssal plain was an empty hot dry salt-floored sink. Discovery. The landmark scientific expedition of the British Royal Navy survey ship HMS Challenger yielded a tremendous amount of bathymetric data, much of which has been confirmed by subsequent researchers. Bathymetric data obtained during the course of the Challenger expedition enabled scientists to draw maps, which provided a rough outline of certain major submarine terrain features, such as the edge of the continental shelves and the mid-Atlantic ridge. This discontinuous set of data points was obtained by the simple technique of taking soundings by lowering long lines from the ship to the seabed. The Challenger expedition was followed by the 1879–1881 expedition of the Jeannette, led by United States Navy Lieutenant George Washington DeLong. The team sailed across the Chukchi Sea and recorded meteorological and astronomical data in addition to taking soundings of the seabed. The ship became trapped in the ice pack near Angel Island in September 1879, and was ultimately crushed and sunk in June 1881. The Jeannette expedition was followed by the 1893–1896 Arctic expedition of Norwegian explorer Fridtjof Nansen aboard the Fram, which proved that the Arctic Ocean was a deep oceanic basin, uninterrupted by any significant land masses north of the Eurasian continent. Beginning in 1916, Canadian physicist Robert William Boyle and other scientists of the Anti-Submarine Detection Investigation Committee undertook research which ultimately led to the development of sonar technology. Acoustic sounding equipment was developed which could be operated much more rapidly than the sounding lines, thus enabling the German Meteor expedition aboard the German research vessel Meteor to take frequent soundings on east-west Atlantic transects. Maps produced from these techniques show the major Atlantic basins, but the depth precision of these early instruments was not sufficient to reveal the flat featureless abyssal plains. As technology improved, measurement of depth, latitude and longitude became more precise and it became possible to collect more or less continuous sets of data points. This allowed researchers to draw accurate and detailed maps of large areas of the ocean floor. Use of a continuously recording fathometer enabled Tolstoy and Ewing in the summer of 1947 to identify and describe the first abyssal plain. This plain, located to the south of Newfoundland, is now known as the Socham Abyssal Plain. Following this discovery, many other examples were found in all the oceans. The Challenger Deep is the deepest surveyed point of all of Earth's oceans. It is located at the southern end of the Mariana Trench near the Mariana Islands Group. The depression is named after HMS Challenger, whose researchers made the first recordings of its depth on March 23, 1875 at Station 225. The reported depth was 4,475 fathoms based on two separate soundings. On June 1, 2009, sonar mapping of the Challenger Deep by the Simrad M120 multibeam sonar bathymetry system aboard the RV Kilo Mona indicated a maximum depth of 10,971 meters. The sonar system uses phase and amplitude bottom detection, with an accuracy of better than 0.2% of water depth. Terrain features, hydrothermal vents. A rare but important terrain feature found in the abyssal and hadal zones is the hydrothermal vent. In contrast to the approximately 2 degrees Celsius ambient water temperature at these depths, water emerges from these vents at temperatures ranging from 60 degrees Celsius up to as high as 464 degrees Celsius. Due to the high barometric pressure at these depths, Water may exist in either its liquid form or as a supercritical fluid at such temperatures. At a barometric pressure of 218 atmospheres, the critical point of water is 375 degrees Celsius. At a depth of 3,000 meters, the barometric pressure of seawater is more than 300 atmospheres. At this depth and pressure, seawater becomes supercritical at a temperature of 407 degrees Celsius. However, the increase in salinity at this depth pushes the water closer to its critical point. Thus, water emerging from the hottest parts of some hydrothermal vents, black smokers and submarine volcanoes can be a supercritical fluid, possessing physical properties between those of a gas and those of a liquid. Sister Peak, Shrimp Farm and Mephisto are three hydrothermal vents of the black smoker category, located on the mid-Atlantic ridge near Ascension Island. They are presumed to have been active since an earthquake shook the region in 2002. These vents have been observed to vent phase separated, vapor-type fluids. In 2008, sustained exit temperatures of up to 407 degrees Celsius were recorded at one of these vents, with a peak recorded temperature of up to 464 degrees Celsius. These thermodynamic conditions exceed the critical point of seawater, and are the highest temperatures recorded to date from the seafloor. This is the first reported evidence for direct magmatic hydrothermal interaction on a slow-spreading mid-ocean ridge. Cold seeps. Another unusual feature found in the abyssal and hadal zones is the cold seep, sometimes called a cold vent. This is an area of the seabed where seepage of hydrogen sulfide, methane and other hydrocarbon-rich fluid occurs, often in the form of a deep-sea brine pool. The first cold seeps were discovered in 1983, at a depth of 3,200 meters in the Gulf of Mexico. Since then, cold seeps have been discovered in many other areas of the world ocean, including the Monterey Submarine Canyon just off Monterey Bay, California, the Sea of Japan, off the Pacific coast of Costa Rica, off the Atlantic coast of Africa, off the coast of Alaska, and under an ice shelf in Antarctica. Biodiversity. Though the plains were once assumed to be vast, desert-like habitats, research over the past decade or so showed that they teem with a wide variety of microbial life. However, ecosystem structure and function at the deep sea floor have historically been very poorly studied because of the size and remoteness of the abyss. Recent oceanographic expeditions conducted by an international group of scientists from the Census of Diversity of Abyssal Marine Life have found an extremely high level of biodiversity on abyssal plains, with up to 2,000 species of bacteria, 250 species of protozoans, and 500 species of invertebrates, typically found at single abyssal sites. New species make up more than 80% of the thousands of seafloor invertebrate species collected at any abyssal station, highlighting our heretofore poor understanding of abyssal diversity and evolution. Richer biodiversity is associated with areas of known phytodetritus input and higher organic carbon flux. Abyssobrochulogalatheoi, a species of cusk eel in the family of Ophidiidae, is among the deepest living species of fish. In 1970, one specimen was trawled from a depth of 8370 meters in the Puerto Rico Trench. The animal was dead, however, upon arrival at the surface. In 2008, the hadal snailfish was observed and recorded at a depth of 7,700 meters in the Japan Trench. These are, to date, the deepest living fish ever recorded. Other fish of the abyssal zone include the fishes of the Hypnopidae family, which includes the abyssal spiderfish, tripodfish, fish, and the black lizardfish. Some members of this family have been recorded from depths of more than 6,000 meters. CEDAMR scientists have demonstrated that some abyssal and hadal species have a cosmopolitan distribution. One example of this would be protozoan foraminiferans, certain species of which are distributed from the Arctic to the Antarctic. Other faunal groups, such as the polychaete worms and isopod crustaceans, appear to be endemic to certain specific plains and basins. Many apparently unique taxa of nematode worms have also been recently discovered on abyssal plains. This suggests that the very deep ocean has fostered adaptive radiations. The taxonomic composition of the nematode fauna in the abyssal Pacific is similar, but not identical to, that of the North Atlantic. A list of some of the species that have been discovered or redescribed by C. E. Damar can be found here. 11 of the 31 described species of Monoplacophora live below 2,000 meters. Of these 11 species, 2 live exclusively in the Hadal zone. The greatest number of monoplacophorans are from the eastern Pacific Ocean along the oceanic trenches. However, no abyssal monoplacophorans have yet been found in the western Pacific and only one abyssal species has been identified in the Indian Ocean. Of the 922 known species of chitons, 22 species are reported to live below 2,000 meters and 2 of them are restricted to the abyssal plain. Although genetic studies are lacking, at least 6 of these species are thought to be arebothic, having been reported as occurring from the sublittoral to abyssal depths. A large number of the polyplacophorans from great depths are herbivorous or xylophagous, which could explain the difference between the distribution of monoplacophorans and polyplacophorans in the world's oceans. Pericarid crustaceans, including isopods, are known to form a significant part of a macrobenthic community that is responsible for scavenging on large food falls onto the seafloor. In 2000, scientists of the Diversity of the Deep Atlantic Benthos expedition discovered and collected 3 new species of the Acylotra suborder of benthic isopods from the abyssal plains of the Angola Basin in the South Atlantic Ocean. In 2003, De Brouwer et al. Collected some 68,000 pericarid crustaceans from 62 species from baited traps deployed in the Weddell Sea, Scotia Sea, and off the South Shetland Islands. They found that about 98% of the specimens belong to the amphipod superfamily Lisianosoidae, and 2% to the isopod family Cyrillanidae. Half of these species were collected from depths of greater than 1,000 meters. In 2005, the Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology remotely operated vehicle, KAIKO, collected sediment core from the Challenger Deep. 432 living specimens of soft-walled foraminifera were identified in the sediment samples. Foraminifera are single-cell protists that construct shells. There are an estimated 4,000 species of living foraminifera. Out of the 432 organisms collected, the overwhelming majority of the sample consisted of simple, soft-shelled foraminifera, with others representing species of the complex, multi-chambered general Leptohaulosis and Rheophax. Overall, 85% of the specimens consisted of soft-shelled allogromids. This is unusual compared to samples of sediment-dwelling organisms from other deep-sea environments, where the percentage of organic walled foraminifera ranges from 5% to 20% of the total. Small organisms with hard calculated shells have trouble growing at extreme depths because the water at that depth is severely lacking in calcium carbonate. While similar life forms have been known to exist in shallower oceanic trenches and on the abyssal plain, the life forms discovered in the Challenger Deep may represent independent taxa from those shallower ecosystems. This preponderance of soft-shelled organisms at the Challenger Deep may be a result of selection pressure. Millions of years ago, the Challenger Deep was shallower than it is now. Over the past 6 to 9 million years, as the Challenger Deep grew to its present depth, many of the species present in the sediment of that ancient biosphere were unable to adapt to the increasing water pressure and changing environment. Those species that were able to adapt may have been the ancestors of the organisms currently endemic to the Challenger Deep. Polycats occur throughout the Earth's oceans at all depths, from forms that live as plankton near the surface, to the deepest oceanic trenches. The robot ocean probe Nereus observed a 2,3 cm specimen of polychalet at the bottom of the Challenger Deep on May 31, 2009. There are more than 10,000 described species of polycats. They can be found in nearly every marine environment. Some species live in the coldest ocean temperatures of the Hadal zone, while others can be found in the extremely hot waters adjacent to hydrothermal vents. Within the abyssal and Hadal zones, the areas around submarine hydrothermal vents and cold seeps have by far the greatest biomass and biodiversity per unit area. Fueled by the chemicals dissolved in the vent fluids, these areas are often home to large and diverse communities of thermophilic, holophilic and other extremophilic prokaryotic microorganisms, often arranged in large bacterial mats near cold seeps. In these locations, chemosynthetic archaean bacteria typically form the base of the food chain. Although the process of chemosynthesis is entirely microbial, these chemosynthetic microorganisms often support vast ecosystems consisting of complex multicellular organisms through symbiosis. These communities are characterized by species such as vesicomiid clams, mytilid mussels, limpets, isopods, giant tube worms, soft corals, rhealpouts, galatide crabs, and albino-carrot shrimp. The deepest seep community discovered thus far is located in the Japan Trench, at a depth of 7,700 meters. Probably the most important ecological characteristic of abyssal ecosystems is energy limitation. Abyssal seafloor communities are considered to be food-limited because benthic production depends on the input of detrital organic material produced in the euphotic zone, thousands of meters above. Most of the organic flux arrives as an attenuated rain of small particles, which decreases inversely with water depth. The small particle flux can be augmented by the fall of larger carcasses and downslope transport of organic material near continental margins. Exploitation of resources. In addition to their high biodiversity, abyssal plains are of great current and future commercial and strategic interest. For example, they may be used for the legal and illegal disposal of large structures such as ships and oil rigs, radioactive waste and other hazardous waste, such as munitions. They may also be attractive sites for deep-sea fishing, and extraction of oil and gas and other minerals. Future deep-sea waste disposal activities that could be significant by 2025 include emplacement of sewage and sludge, carbon dioxide sequestration, and disposal of dredge spoils. As fish stocks dwindle in the upper ocean, deep-sea fisheries are increasingly being targeted for exploitation. Because deep-sea fish are long-lived and slow-growing, these deep-sea fisheries are not thought to be sustainable in the long term given current management practices. Changes in primary production in the photic zone are expected to alter the standing stocks in the food-limited aphotic zone. Hydrocarbon exploration in deep water occasionally results in significant environmental degradation resulting mainly from accumulation of contaminated drill cuttings, but also from oil spills. While the oil gusher involved in the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico originates from a wellhead only 1,500 meters below the ocean's surface, it nevertheless illustrates the kind of environmental disaster that can result from mishaps related to offshore drilling for oil and gas. Sediments of certain abyssal plains contain abundant mineral resources, notably polymetallic nodules. These potato-sized concretions of manganese, iron, nickel, cobalt, and copper, distributed on the seafloor at depths of greater than 4,000 meters, are of significant commercial interest. The area of maximum commercial interest for polymetallic nodule mining lies in international waters of the Pacific Ocean, stretching from 118 degree Euro 157 degree, and from 9 degree Euro 16 degree N, an area of more than 3 million km squared. The abyssal Clarion-Clipperton fracture zone is an area within the Pacific Nodule Province that is currently under exploration for its mineral potential. 8 commercial contractors are currently licensed by the International Seabed Authority to explore nodule resources and to test mining techniques in 8 claim areas, each covering 150,000 km squared. When mining ultimately begins, each mining operation is projected to directly disrupt 300 Euro 800 km squared of seafloor per year and disturb the benthic fauna over an area 5 Euro 10 times that size due to redeposition of suspended sediments. Thus, over the 15-year projected duration of a single mining operation, nodule mining might severely damage abyssal seafloor communities over areas of 20,000 to 45,000 km squared. Limited knowledge of the taxonomy, biogeography and natural history of deep-sea communities prevents accurate assessment of the risk of species extinctions from large-scale mining. Data acquired from the abyssal North Pacific and North Atlantic suggest that deep-sea ecosystems may be adversely affected by mining operations on decadal time scales. In 1978, a dredge aboard the Hughes Glomar Explorer, operated by the American mining consortium Ocean Minerals Company, made a mining trek at a depth of 5,000 meters in the nodule fields of the CCFZ. In 2004, the French Research Institute for Exploitation of the Sea conducted the Nodules expedition to this mining tract to study the long-term effects of this physical disturbance on the sediment and its benthic fauna. Samples taken of the superficial sediment revealed that its physical and chemical properties had not shown any recovery since the disturbance made 26 years earlier. On the other hand, the biological activity measured in the track by instruments aboard the manned submersible bathyscaphe Nodule did not differ from a nearby unperturbed site. This data suggests that the benthic fauna and nutrient fluxes at the water-sediment interface has fully recovered. List of abyssal plains. See also, List of oceanic landforms, List of submarine topographical features, Oceanic basin, Oceanic plateau, Oceanic ridge, Oceanic trench, Physical oceanography, references. Bibliography. External links, Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. Deep sea ecosystems affected by climate change. Science Daily. Retrieved June 18, 2010 A.